It's live here.
Hi guys, welcome back to the podcast in its second edition with the theme about weight cutting today. First of all, short introduction. I'm the founder and head coach of the Fenriz gym MMA section, and I'm a former professional fighter. I studied sports science and so on and so forth. I think most of the viewers know us all, but just as a short overview. Then here we have Felipe, please.
Hello everyone, Felipe. I'm Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt for 4 years now, and I'm the head coach and founder from Gracie Berlin. It's good enough.
All right. So then we have Stella. She's new today. The hosts of the podcast are supposed to be switching here and there, and if you leave it in the comments, you can vote us out maybe. We will come to your home and take revenge, but we will obey first.
Yeah, I'm Stella. I'm one of the coaches of Cardia Muay Thai. And Cardia has been a club before, and we merged with Fenriz last year. I have a couple of Muay Thai fights, and I'm still an active fighter. I teach Muay Thai classes. I also prepare and coach fighters on an amateur level. I've been coaching teams of some professional fighters too. And I trained and fought in Thailand too, but my main setting of martial arts has always been in Berlin, in very different contexts. And what might also be interesting for a talking round like this, I'm also an anthropologist, and I made my degree in the field of sports sociology. And yeah, I also give seminars and publish in this field with the project 1 Minute Less.
I feel bad about my introduction.
The band.
So at the end, the wrestler. Making sure.
I guess that was our
We had the
first
sports scientist, the JJ lady, and
I'm a former lawyer, just to raise the bar.
questions why former.
Now we have Jens with a slightly raised bar about introductions from Stella.
So I'm the wrestling coach at Fenriz. I used to wrestle in high school a little bit, and then wrestled over here in Germany a little bit, not in the club. Actually, was born in an MMA club, and now I'm coaching wrestling, folk style wrestling, which it is, to some of the better German MMA fighters here in Berlin, and in our team as well.
Yeah.
And I'm an acting business lawyer, by the way. So I need to raise the bar a little bit. Not to be a stupid wrestler.
All right. So much for the introduction, guys. First of all, you see that we have different approaches, different backgrounds in different martial arts, and in all of those, wrestling already at amateur level very heavily. In Muay Thai, as far as I know, not that heavily in amateur. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the same, as far as I'm informed. There is weight cutting, of course, on amateur level, but not that much. But in professional level, of course, because of the weight classes. And in MMA, they made it, in the professional division, they made it a new dimension of weight cutting, which undoubtedly even had the loss of life already as a consequence. So we will talk about this later. And first of all, if we talk about weight cutting today, we're not talking about people with an upcoming amateur fight training a little more to reduce their body fat, which most cases is quite a healthy thing to a certain level, but we're talking about the professional term of weight cutting, which means reducing an already very lean and clean athletic weight even more in a short period of time. So the first thing we have to ask is why would people do that? And the answer is obvious. It's because if you're the heavier guy in the ring in any match, if you have more body mass, athletic, of course, athletic body mass, but even just body mass, if you're the heavier fighter or fightress, then you have an advantage. If you, for example, can fight in a lower weight class in order to have a reach advantage, already the same. And if you have more muscle mass, of course, even more. On the other hand, there are undoubtedly risk factors concerning like cognitive functions, stamina, and whatever. But to make a start in all this is, what do you guys think? I'll just put it in the round one by one. What do you guys think is the, let's say, healthy limit of weight cutting? Felipe, what do you think?
I'm going to bring to the jiu-jitsu field. So the one that I have more contact, obviously. And in jiu-jitsu, the situation is like most people wait right before their match, which makes weight cutting a little bit complicated. Like I experienced this. I remember once I had some problems with my meals, and I had to drop 2 kilos in 2 hours. And it was one of the worst experiences of my life. But I see that like being done like professionally more and more, because the tournaments are getting bigger and more mainstream. People need to win to make a career for themselves. And for example, in the Europeans, I saw like people dropping 5 kilos right before their, which is like impressive, and they could actually perform. But well, from my experience, it was very complicated, and I was very scared to get injured, and I regret doing that. Actually, it was very unhealthy for me. And like what I did afterwards was like cutting weight in a more responsible way through like I spent 1 month eating a can of tuna every day as a dinner, which was not satisfying, but I managed to make weight in a way more healthier way. So I think, for example, in jiu-jitsu, you have to be very careful when you drop liquids before a match, because especially you will have, I don't know, 5 minutes to hydrate yourself after you're on the scale, and in order to perform dehydrated is like it's a terrible experience. But sadly, it's happening more and more. I remember, like, I've seen mothers with kids in tournaments sending their kids to the bathroom so they can pee or
hopefully,
yeah, or to the number 2 or puke just to
that's the point.
Just to make weight.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was very. It wasn't my student, so I was not saying anything, but it is complicated to see that happen. Like I said, that this doesn't happen at amateur level, but since it's becoming so common among professionals, it's getting popular among amateurs as well. So, and I see this with concern. Either people understand how to do that in a better way, or they should make the weigh-ins a day before so people can actually hydrate in a safer way.
So.
I think it's kind of a difficult question, because I think we also need to take into consideration that people are very individual and very different, and we all bring very different experiences with it. Also from a social point of view, We bring very different physical constituencies, different metabolism, and also athletes do bring very different knowledge and habits, how they are doing nutrition. And yeah, I think when it's the question to which degree is it healthy, it's always very important to take in consideration that the individual parameters people bring with them, and that you also are aware of what does this person bring with. When you really cut a short amount in a short amount of time, I think it's also important you need to have a proper time to rehydrate, to do everything. And I see the point you made also, that it's such a, I think the whole weight cutting topic is such a kind of a status quo in martial arts, that even amateur fighters think that's what you need to do in order to fight.
Yeah.
And I think what I see a lot on an amateur level is that people stress about it very much when it's not yet necessary, not yet the time of point where you need to do this. And it kind of, I also often have the feeling it kind of distracts the people. I think they could use this energy worrying about their weight way better for their training, for their learning, instead of focusing on a weight which at this point is not so important yet.
Yeah, that's true.
For me, it's a couple, not just a couple. It's a lot of things actually that needs to get into this taken into account. I think first of all, how much, as you already said, how much weight do you cut in a short amount of time to do what? So if you do it for a wrestling match, you will get used to cutting some weight. In high school, I think I had a dual meet every Wednesday, and every weekend we had a tournament, so I'd at least make the weight 2 times a week, which is I think regular for wrestling in high school. So I would always make something in between 2 or 3 kilos, which is 6 to 7 pounds every time I had to make weight, because I went up again very easy or very quick, because I was wrestling at 171 pounds, and if you look at me now, this is far away from my ideal weight, I guess. But to understand what is the best amount of weight you can lose, is you have to look at the body type. How much fat does he carry around with himself? What is it? What is he going to do afterwards? Does he have time to reload a little bit? Which still is unhealthy if you have time to reload. If you drop too much water, I think not only for your brain but for your heart rates and everything as well. And then it takes into account again what martial arts you do. I think grappling wise, you could be fine with losing a little bit more water than you should have, but if you do something where you get hit on the head and your brain like wobbles around in your head, I think you need this water. And my understanding is that if you drop too much water, then this will affect your being able to withstand KO punches as well. So some guys, if you drop too much weight, you will see them getting dizzy from punches where they would take in training much more punches, actually. So I think looking at MMA, the guys who really brought it to MMA, I think it was wrestlers from college, because if you look at how much weight they have to drop every time, it's sometimes if you make it to the NCAA finals, for example, it's the college wrestling finals. For anybody who doesn't know, if you make it there, you will wrestle. If you make it to the final, you will wrestle 3 days. Even if you not make it to the finals, but if you make it to the top 4, you will wrestle 3 days, and you will have to wait in every morning again. Not taking into account that you have not only 1 wrestling match per day, but at the first day I think it's 4 wrestling matches. Second day should be the same, or 3, and then you have only 2 matches at the last day. But maybe just the final. I'm not really sure. But you still have to wait in 3 times. And what sounds funny, but this is really what happens to a lot of guys that I know. You will gain weight while you wrestling during the tournament, because you will drink, you will use energy stuff, and sometimes people get off scale, so they get on scale right before the tournament starts. So it's usually 1 or 2 hours depending on your weight class when you start to wrestle, and they will have the weight back on that they used to start cutting. Yeah. So they probably will gain some as well, additionally to the stuff that they regain during the day, and then they have to cut during night. So that makes it very complicated because you, even without sleep, if you have a wrestling match on that level the next day, and not only one, but 2 or 3 or 4, you need to have a level of conditioning, and you also need to have a level of concentration. And you can see that sometimes in the second day. You see people who are during the regular season will win almost every match, and then they will lose on the second day almost because they lost too much weight, didn't get enough sleep, lost the weight late, sometime in the morning. I think a very famous guy I just saw a documentary about, or just an interview, was Mark Munoz. He used to fight in the UFC, and he always had a weight problem, also in the UFC. I think he always made weight, but if you saw him during the off seasons, or he has some kind of, I've seen him now, there's like a lot of weight he gained. And then the story is actually, would recommend anybody to really dig that up on YouTube or on Pro Wrestling. It's a really funny story because his coach was John Smith, one of the best Olympian wrestlers the United States ever had, and he always wanted him to drop down to 171 kilos. And if you watch 171 pounds, and if you watch him now, he's like huge. And so, and he lost in the second day. He was number 4, I guess. He said he was ranked number 4. He won almost every match during the season, and he lost on the second day because he had to lose 11 pounds during that.
Now that you mentioned Mark Munoz, since he and his opponent Gegard Mousasi were fighting in Berlin, and they were weighing in and having the press meeting at our gym there, I could talk to him, and he actually told me he runs around like 18 to 20 kilos heavier than he fights. And when he starts fight camp, he still has like 15 kilos more than for fight night. And the last like 8 kilos or something he does in the last 72 hours.
So I can tell you that they will not be able to do that during wrestling season, definitely not, because they will have to weigh them more often. But that's the mindset of if you have somebody who's wrestling his whole life, he's cutting weight his whole life. And then it's really easy for him. If I have a match in 3 months and I have to just cut weight one time, then they do the multiplication for themselves. They say, oh, it's just one time. And any wrestler who's watching will say the same. It's just one time. Easily I can cut more than 10 pounds or 15 pounds for that one time. But guys, beginners fighting for MMA and coming from grappling backgrounds, it's really dangerous. And when you get hit to the head or even to the stomach, if you lose too much water, you will probably not be able to regain everything for the next day. And it's really dangerous for some people, I think.
The thing is that, as Stella mentioned earlier, people were given more time to rehydrate. That's, I guess, part of the main reason why you have weigh-ins a day before, also for public appearances and this and that. It originated in boxing and very long time ago, where the first like real professional boxers from professional camps just had an advantage over their opponents who were still normal guys with normal jobs and didn't have the opportunity to cut that much weight. So it was an advantage back then. But since, like in all professional sports that we mentioned, the pros are now fighting for a living and doing this, and everything evolves around this. They just use it to cut more and more weight.
The question is, will they lose more money if they do it professionally and they're cutting weight and they're making. If you see some examples, they don't make weight a lot of times, so they lose money there. The 20% will not bother them in the UFC, but on the long run, so, the 20% not. Because I saw that in a documentary that was very good. I think that one of the first referees from the UFC, or the first referee, he brought that up, and I never thought about it that way. But he actually said, okay, the fighters that take the 20%, if you know that you're not going to make weight and not even try to make the weight, so nobody's really checking it too much. So you're not going to make the weight. You know you're not going to make the weight. But they will not tell your opponent that you are not going to make weight. They will tell him the same day that you're not going to make the weight. Your opponent will find out that you didn't make weight, that they cut 20%. But you will have done the whole cut. And the other guy stopped doing the cut or didn't even start the cut. And that's 200% energy level that he has more. Definitely. So now he loses 20% of his purse, but he wins the fight most definitely. Yeah. And maybe he gets the bigger purse. Maybe even in a devastating fashion. And he said maybe his contract was up on dispute. So he loses those 20%, but he gains probably 20 to 100% with a new contract. And guys are now doing the math.
Yeah, the guy.
And I haven't thought about it that way, by the way. So that's a nice.
It's curious because like the other guy, he has the option of forfeit the fight if the guy doesn't make weight. But in that moment where you already did all the camp, paid for everything, of course. Like everything that you don't make money if you don't fight.
Also, you make the contractor and your fans unhappy.
So really taking that into consideration now. That they're really juggling business decisions around weight cutting. And
that's what I want to say. It's business then. It's not anymore about like.
But who does more money? Yeah? If they cannot put the fight up, I think that's something, and that's what they're stressed as well. Is get rid of the 20%. It doesn't bother them. Give them at least the 50% or whatever, and make sure that they cannot fight for the next 12 months. So then it's another business decision now, because then I maybe lose even more money, not only 50%, but I lose even more money because I will not be able to fight the next 12 months. So that's maybe because at the end it's legal cheating, I would say. If you do it that way.
The next question I would like to pose to all of you in a row again is
one thing maybe before we get to there was one point that we didn't mention, is the way how people cut weight. So what we used to do in high school, and I never thought about it till I got older, because my coach, what we used to do is he would either close the sauna, put us all in there, but there was not enough space because everybody had to make weight, so we had those big showers in our locker rooms, and he would hang towels around the shower, would turn on all showers, and we would get in the sweatsuits, like 3 times, 4 times big sweatsuits, and those plastic sweatsuits from the 80s and 90s, I don't know if you guys remember. We were just doing jump ropes and working out, cutting the last weight. And I think that's unhealthy if you do that a lot of times. But I think all wrestlers are doing it.
I can tell you from a sports science perspective, yes.
Yeah, but that's really the unhealthy way. That's how you make in 1 hour or 2 hours, depending on body type. Yeah, I was that body type who loses water quickly, but still am. So even with 171 pounds, I was skinnier, but I was losing water very quick. So that was easy for me. I would lose 1 to in 1 hour, I'd lose 6 pounds probably. Yeah, good. And the other thing he stressed us doing is I was wrestling in South Carolina. It's a larger area of traveling around. I think it's almost the size of Germany. So we had to travel even bigger, travel around to different dual meets. What we always used to do with we had to travel for 4, 5, 6 hours, and then we would weigh in at the same day still, and we used to spit in the cup, and that makes some pounds as well.
But what I found interesting that you said is that how the coaches there are like making the students do the weigh-ins 2 times a week. Like it has like of course downsides and upsides because people have to make weight every time, but at least they're keeping their weight.
That's true.
They're keeping themselves close to their weight. I remember like the last time I had competitions was around 2014-15, and every tournament I was 500 grams above, and that was really easy to cut. So I was very comfortable doing that because I knew myself, and I was comfortable walking around in that weight. And I mean, if you're already controlling yourself in that sense, it makes a little bit easier. But it is stressful if you have to make weight like twice a week.
It depends on how much. Yeah, that's the coach that needs to take care of you. So I was lucky enough that I had a coach who was not only good at teaching the basic and fundamentals for wrestling, so it's still carrying it today. But even not demanding high weight cuts of you. So the 171, as I told you, I was always in between 2 or 3 kilos of having to cut for the weight, which is not much for wrestling. If you be honest, as I told you, I need 1 hour in the sweatsuit, and I would have the 6 pounds off, or do some spinning. I would have an additional 2 pounds off if I needed to. So that was not too bad. But then that was wrestling in South Carolina, where you have like in your high school maybe 3 or 2 guys in the same weight class. But if you're wrestling upstate, somewhere Pennsylvania, Iowa, where you have already in your high school 6 guys, of at least at 171, probably around 6 guys already trying to really get the spot on for this dual meet the next week. So you're actually, this weight cutting thing now becomes even more, you're thinking about it even more. Now you're cutting more weight because you want to be the stronger guy. Maybe not the bigger, but the stronger guy actually. So maybe it's the same thing, but at the end you think you get the advantage of being strong. And the same guys in high school, same weight class, they will cut in Iowa, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, all those upstate, middle states, they will cut a lot of more weights. And those were the accidents happen as well. So
but as we all agree, I guess, the weight cut in the dimensions it has reached today is a health risk. In MMA, because of the damage to the brain, let alone in grappling, because of course dehydrated bodies injure easier than hydrated ones, and so it's all in. We're all in the same boat, no matter which martial arts. The next question I would like to pose is, who should be responsible for controlling it? The athletes themselves, as if they are professionals, their coaches or teams, or even the organizations that fight, that organize the fights, or maybe the organizations that pose the weight classes and the rule sets and stuff. Because the problem is if you say, like in MMA, it's undoubtedly that several times fights had to be cancelled because the fighters trying to cut the weight were in critical condition, had to be rushed to the hospital. There was a 21-year-old prodigy from China who died from the weight cut. So it is a problem. It is a problem. And as I said, especially in MMA, they put it into a new dimension. But in general, hard weight cuts damage your health. Very, very easily said. So who should be responsible? Who should be the one regulating that weight cuts don't get out of control? Believe it.
I think it has to be a joint effort. You know, like I think that all the events should make efforts to make it as safe as possible. But the problem is, for example, people in jiu-jitsu, they try to put the weightings right before the fight, so people don't cut too much weight. But people will cut weight either way. So it is a complicated scenario. I think, for example, the best solution, what I see in jiu-jitsu happening is, actually I saw this happening here for the way before that I saw in the US and Brazil. Like they wait everyone when the tournament starts. And people have hours to hydrate themselves and to eat. So I think that's the event, the organization doing their best effort to care for the athletes. And of course, like, I mean, I think coaches and the students have to talk every time and understand each other in a way that they can meet and see what it is the best scenario in which people can have can be safe and also perform the best way possible. Normally what happens is, like, in my experience as a coach, a lot of people come to me asking about which weight division they should be fighting in. And I always, especially because it's amateur, mostly white blue belts and stuff, so I always tell them that it's important for them to be comfortable. So if someone comes to me like, Felipe, I weigh this, which weight class is more suitable for me, then I'm going to put the options, like, is it okay for you to drop, like, I don't know, 4 kilos in a month? If not, if this will affect your performance, then keep your weight and fight in a higher weight class. If it is okay for you to drop 4 kilos, because it depends. I have students who drop weight real easily. So I usually give them, like, ask them how they feel about dropping weight in situations like this. And so I try not to put so much pressure on the students in that sense. So I think it should be like, of course, the event has to be responsible and try to think in the best way possible to make it safe. But I think there has to be a communication from coaches and students. I see a lot of coaches pressuring their students too much, which leads to injuries, and also, like what Stella said about people fighting focused only on making weight. And I mean, if your focus should be on fight, that's the most important thing. And this is the thing. I think everybody is responsible for that.
I would agree that, yeah, of course, also events to have a certain level of responsibility. But I think in the end, also a lot responsibility lies on the coaches and how you talk about this topic with your students and what you advise them. And I think there are a lot of coaches where what I was also talking about, there is this random attitude used like, okay, you want to fight, you need to lose weight, which is not necessarily true, and people need to be seen individual. And I think the role, especially when you have younger people, the role a coach has according to this, how this topic is approached, how you also teach people how to develop a conscious relationship to your body, which you, in the end, you do need this. If you wanna compete, if you wanna be an athlete, if you also wanna fight on a long-term basis, it's very necessary that people develop healthy relationship to their body, that they're aware of what does my body need, in which situations does my body react how, and that I think the role of a coach is also to help and feed people with this knowledge, getting the right knowledge. How do they properly inform themselves? How do they properly find out about how their body works and all this? So this is a big responsibility I see in the role of coaching.
Maybe we have 2 points against what you guys are saying, which is fine on a certain level. The coach should take care, but that's when he has no pressure. So if he has the pressure to that his team performs on high school and college level especially, there's the dependencies of a job for the coach. And it's not only the coaching job, it's also in high school the job as a teacher as well. Yeah. If you don't perform as in certain states as the wrestling coach, you're the wrestling head coach, you automatically have some job as a teacher as well. And if you don't perform, you will lose the coach job and you lose the teaching job as well. So you need to perform. So it's a question is, do I care about my students? Somehow I will always. So, but I do have to have success. So there's a fine line in between. How much can the coach actually be taken responsible? I'm with you. In some degree, it has to be, but in some degree, it has to be taken away from them because there's too much own interest in this as well. Especially if you have a professional MMA fighters. Not here in Germany. That's a little bit different. But if you go over to the States or in Australia now, or even in Brazil, there's really a thin line of making money. If you're guys dropping out of your gym, some professional fighters dropping out of your gym because they feel that you're pushing them into the wrong weight class, upper weight class, and you're not really making sure that they're making the weight down low somewhere, they will leave the gym, and that will really cost you money as professional fighting. So that's the other point. So I think, and then the organization as well. If you put it in the hand of the organization, I think it's yeah, you can do that, and only if the organization is really taking care of it in a level where you know that they really don't care about making money that much because they have their own money and they want to make fights. But if you, for example, if you use the UFC, what the UFC is doing, my understanding is they're not putting out the rules for making weights. They're putting out the rules for the weight you have to make. But the rules for making the weight is always the athletic department in each of these states. So in the US, you don't have only one person. You don't have the coach who can tell you how you have to make weight. You don't have the UFC. They just tell you what weight you have to make in the first day. I think now you have 2 weight checks. I think you have one on the 3rd or 4th day before weighing, and then you have another one. You have to make that one, and then you have another one at the end.
And you have a limit and difference, yes.
But the thing is, there's a totally different weight cutting methodology in California, and if you look at it, that's basically new because I think they had 1 or 2 deaths taken into account because of boxing and because of MMA and weight cutting reasons. There was some hospitalization, and now they're really taking care of how much weight you're allowed to lose, how much weight you're even starting the weight cut with. So you have to not only for the last week, you're not only delivering dates, you have to deliver dates from the moment the fight is signed. So that's cool. But yeah, it's cool from California that they're doing it. But you have 50 other states in the US that are not doing it that way. Yeah. And you have Las Vegas who's doing it differently. And guess what? How many fights of the UFC did we see in California the last couple of months?
I also appreciate your idealism, but in the end, I can totally agree with Jens that the more pressure on the livelihood or the reputation of the gym, or the money involved is, the less you can count on people being responsible.
And you shouldn't. So what you should know about this one, as we do laws for everything, and we tell people how to drive the car, we tell people where to speed and where not to speed. So why don't tell people how to? In Germany, this will take a longer time than in the US or maybe in Russia, because people know the sport, or in China, now people will start getting into martial arts more and understanding how much you need to take care of telling people how to take care of their health. In Germany, I don't think that we will have ever anybody telling us how to cut weight. But in the US, it's a real big topic now. They're discussing it. And what I would really enjoy for the people fighting in the US, if you don't have 50 or 52 states, I'm sorry, if you don't have 52 different meanings, different understandings and discussion about how to really regulate this, because if you have one regulation behind it, then you can look at the coach as well. And then you can look at the organization as well. But let's have a regulatory somewhere around the whole world, maybe, which was not possible because Germany will not do the same as the US. But get it regulated so nobody has to depend on the organization or on the coach.
The problem is that, like, this situation that you said about Martin Munoz is a situation that got normal.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Anderson Silva was doing the same.
Yeah.
He was
everybody does. I personally coached fighters who insisted on cutting weight in an amount that I found completely irresponsible.
Yeah.
And what did you do then?
Well, I tried to convince them otherwise, but since they're adults, I let them fight, and in the hoping that the experience would show that it's the wrong decision to make. But on a professional level, on a high professional level, people will not listen.
See, that's one of the reasons why I don't go to corners anymore. Because I feel like the same you feel, the same you did, and I'm more stricter in this. But I'm not in the position that you are to having to make money with the gym, having multiple people out there. I just tell them, let's look at Ati and Ryan. Great fighters, they're cutting a whole lot of weight. I think sometimes maybe Ati is not doing it healthy, but he's somehow managing, and he never had the problems of getting knocked out and he's getting punched out. So it looks like they're both doing it okay. But if I would have a different opinion about it, I would express that. And if I would have somebody coming up to me, that's why I really start coaching in corners, because I said I don't want to have to take a decision of do I want to coach this guy in the corner, but I feel that he's doing something I would never do, then I cannot coach the guy. That's my opinion. I'm not telling that you need to do it that way. That's just my opinion. That's why I started in general, because I don't want to get into that, because I like everybody very much that is training with me, almost everybody, because I feel like I always feel a little bit more important if somebody comes up to me and asks, and I don't care if it's a good fighter or if it's a starter. If somebody comes up to me and says, "Yes, please show me some wrestling," I'm all excited. And I'm like, "Oh, somebody wants to learn wrestling." That's the best thing you can ask for me. Don't ask me parenting, or don't ask me about mathematics or law or anything. I don't care. But if you ask me about teaching wrestling, you're already my best friend. So I would have a problem now telling the guy I don't want to coach you because you're not doing what I think you should do, and he will leave the gym now or will leave me. And since I don't care since I put myself free of this, it's very easy for me to say what you're doing is bullshit, but I don't care.
Yeah, but you see, like, those situations, it has to be handled with care. So I think when you see, for example, talking about professional fighters, you will see the brothers. There's a whole team deciding this. It's not just the athlete alone or one coach. Like, they get together and decide which weight class makes sense. And like, I think that the best example, like, I was watching that fight, recent one between Anthony Smith and Wilbur Teixeira, and a lot of, like, for me it was a terrible fight to watch because
I think it was hurting.
I mean, it was so hard to watch. And
talking to him, like,
and you see, like, everybody was saying bad things about the coach. Like, why didn't he interrupt? And I was one of those people. I was like, man, like, stop. And then Anthony Smith came out and
I didn't saw anything.
and said, if he had done this, I would have fired him. And this is probably something that they have discussed before as well. So it is complicated for us from the outside also to say, this is bad. And I mean, it's a decision. I think we might not agree, but I mean, they know each other. They know their fighters themselves as a coach, as a trainer, as a fighter. So it is always a complicated decision, but they're talking to each other. And this is what I had before, like actually knowing each other and talking to each other to understand what's the healthiest solution in that case. I don't think this was the best solution in that specific fight. Like the guy was losing his teeth. But I mean, talking about weight cutting is the same. And yet, even with all of those decisions being made at a professional level, you see guys going to the hospital. I remember Renan Barão.
Yeah, he was in hospital. That's the fight by California. I think changed their perspective on regulating this weight cutting. Because, yeah. And I remember like Fenriz versus was the guy who got popped for steroids right afterwards for the guy who was bantamweight champion before that and dropped down to 135. Yeah, Dillashaw? Yeah. No, Dillashaw. It was Dillashaw. And he got clipped with one punch and got knocked out. It's because that's the thing that we're discussing. That's not because Henry Cejudo is the hardest puncher in the division. It's because there was too much weight that he had to cut. I mean, look at him, how much weight he cuts for the bantamweight. I don't know how much he cuts, but he already looks really slimmed down if you see him on weight days, waiting days. That's, I think, what, 6-7 more pounds that he needs to cut? Or 10, I think it's 10. It's 145 and 135, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's 10 more pounds he has to cut.
Yeah.
So he was out of it. Definitely. That's one of those effects.
Yeah.
So he got popped for steroids as well. So he lost a lot more than just he would have lost for.
The thing that I always think about is how could this be restarted? How could this be done? That the heavy weight cutting maybe is tackled, because for example, if we would now introduce new measures like they tried, like in a I think in a very light way, not really like, okay, we will tackle weight cutting because people are dying and are hospitalized, but more like, yeah, there's pressure from outside and people don't like to hear about that. But the problem on the other side is, what would happen is, you would have to either redefine every weight class, or you would have to fight every title new, because if champions in the UFC, or I think it's the same for Muay Thai champions, or for world-class ADCC champions or something, or Jiu-Jitsu world champions. The problem is that if there would be a method, let's just assume they are controlled the whole year, like drug tests. And for example, ONE FC started out like this. But if they would do this, nobody would be able to make the weight that he's a champion in, or that he was fighting before. So what do? Do you change all weight classes, and by which amount? Or do you...
add additional weight classes, I guess. Because those weight classes are too much. I think it's always 10 pounds in between. That's too much.
It's not only 10.
Not only always. 10. But some...
weight classes are even more.
But there's a big difference between I think Rooster and Benton. This is 10 pounds. Yeah. This is too much.
Yeah, it starts with 10 pounds weight classes, and then it gets even more. It gets 170, 185, 205, and then 265. But
so they
supposed to be open class.
So they could have. I mean, if they don't want to do it like boxing, where you have like people running through weight classes from, look at Roy Jones Jr. or anybody.
That's the point.
5-6 weight classes they do in the championships. So now you know how much weight they're cutting their boxing as well. So
yeah, but the weight classes in boxing are like 2 kilos apart or something.
So don't do it that much, but do like the wrestling weight classes. So I think it's 5 pounds, 6 pounds, something. Now they're not the Olympic ones, but they want.
Do you really want to create even more champions?
I want to create it safer because I think a lot of people, especially in the 155 pounds, they would not fight in the 155 pounds if you put it up to
160.
160, for example, yeah, and especially if you see the jump between 185 and 205, there's definitely a weight class missing in there.
I can just say that I've always found it ridiculous how many world champions in boxing you have because you have 2.5 kilo weight classes.
But because you have three or four or five different organizations as well.
That's the next point. But you also have different MMA worldwide organizations, but they all cling to the same weight classes. And if you would like insert new weight classes and double the weight classes,
maybe not double, but use those where you have this big jump in between actually to make some more weight classes. Because you have to take danger away, and if it doesn't, I mean, when we started UFC, everybody was like, we have one champion, only one weight class, one champion. Then 4, 5, 6, 7 UFCs afterwards, now you had I think 3 weight classes, and everybody's like, oh, that's too much already, 3 weight classes. So now we had what, 10? I don't know.
That was a different story. The problem was that the UFC wanted to be legalized in USA, and without weight classes, the athletic commissions wouldn't consider it a sport. That's the point. So they had to introduce weight classes.
Yeah, but I still see no problem in adding more weight classes. I think the problem is the all the different organizations you have. So if you look at wrestling, for example, if you're world champion in wrestling, you are the world champion in wrestling. There's no doubt that there's anybody else who's going to be a world champion in wrestling. And if you're the Olympic champion in wrestling, you are the Olympic champion of the whole world. There's no doubt that there's anybody else who can claim that they have an Olympic medal. So that's something we will not reach for MMA, for boxing, for Thai boxing, because you have too many private organizations. There are no private organizations in wrestling. Yeah, so you have private organizations, but I think that should not hinder us to make it safer. And I think the first step to make it safer is adding more weight classes. And the second thing, because that will not stop people from dropping weight. And the second will not stop. It will just help for some people to have to not drop that much, maybe. Yeah, but I don't know if it's really just as you say, just a blow up of champions. Could be. But regulated more. And I think it should be regulated. And maybe that's a pressure you should put on an organization to say, if you really that championship organization, then take the state that has or take the country or whatever that has the most significant rule set on weight cutting, the most strict weight, and adopt those for you. Don't care about the other 49, 50, 51 states, whatever they are doing. If you're doing it, if you say, okay, California is strict, but we will not have any people dying there, then hey, as an organization, now I adopt those rule sets, and it doesn't matter where I make my fights. I have this rule set adopted now. You could do it because one FC is doing it.
That's the point.
So UFC is always saying, hey, we're not doing the regulations. Regulation is the athletic departments, but if you want to uplift, you can always uplift. You cannot downsize.
The thing is, ONE FC from the start was run and invented by enthusiasts of the sport.
Yeah.
And the UFC was invented by managers and businessmen.
Those guys
Yeah, and lawyers and stuff.
No, the races.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I like this idea from California because one thing that I think if they could like both said, like they do with the drug test, also weight define as mid camp and establish, okay, if you have 1.5 months until the fight, and the biggest amount of weight that you can drop to them is like 15 kilos or something like this. I don't know, just guessing. I think this makes sense because what happens right now, and I saw that happening because I actually saw like people, professional MMA fighters, I'm not going to say who, but after the fight was done, the guy was living a life of a obese person. He was
Of course.
eating like fast food daily and stuff. So
Yeah, look at me.
Look at
it becomes really unhealthy. You're never like maintaining a healthy, life. You're either going straight down with your weight, and as soon as the fight is done, you're eating all the trash that you can eat.
Of course.
I mean,
And that's what I meant also when I think as a coach you also have the responsibility to establish a kind of healthy relationships people have to their bodies. And I think this is also when we talk about how could these things change, this is also a part of it. How do you tell your students what it's like? And
I think you can say that comfortably if I'm really trying to provoke you a little bit. You can say that comfortably if you're not depending on the fighters to make the money for you. What you're doing now is you're coaching people, and which is fine, and you're taking care of them as a whole because you're not making money off them winning fights. But if you're really making that big of a money, I doubt that a coach will do that. And I think they should, because at the end, I think if you don't do the weight managing right, I think at the end you will lose more money as you will gain with doing it on a short term. But the other question is, as a coach of an MMA fighter, and if you do it professionally, it's like NFL, it's like Major League Baseball. It's like, look what the coaches don't even look at what the doctors are doing with them guys. Yeah, they get injections, crazy stuff in the NFL, and so they know they have the running back there for 3 years, and he's going to be messed up after the 3 years, definitely. Yeah? And if he's running back for 4 years or 5 years, hey, great. But we'll get another one. We make sure that we have a substitute. That's how it is with MMA. That's where it's getting at. With the big gyms in the States, they have 3, 4, 6, 7 guys fighting. And if you're now starting to do
you only come to professional level in for example, in the big gyms in the States, you only come, or like in amateur wrestling, as he said, you only come to the big stage to get the chance to possibly make money if you already are willing to make more harder sacrifices than others. And that's the point. That's the point. And from a young athlete, those people are partially teens or in their early 20s. You cannot rely on their judgment. You cannot say that like a 22-year-old guy who was hailed as a prodigy in MMA and a future UFC champion, when he's told, even by his responsible coach, hey, dude, you're gonna mess up your life, you're risking your life, then he will say, I'm gonna be champion.
Sure,
if you don't have that mindset, you wouldn't get that far.
And the other question is, but on the other hand, you're right. That's how it should be done as a coach. Exactly. Martial arts.
And I think the thing is also, I mean, this is not, we here are not working in the world of UFC, but still we have to deal with what it also does to our environments where we teach, and the impact is huge.
Yeah.
And I think there it is kind of my answer to trying to fulfill this responsibility and to be aware of what people are in front of me and what do they want and where do they want to go and what can they do.
And what choices do I offer them as a coach as well? Yeah. So I think maybe it's something on amateur level that we are still on, where you really can make a difference as a coach, because you're not in this wheel of having to have success on a short term with your fighter. So you could get him in the right direction. So what I think that will not happen if you get somebody who's been a lifelong wrestler, tell him how he needs to cut weight, he will just cut a huge amount of weight because he sees that opportunity for himself of having to cut every month or every second day during the season, and he knows how much weight he has to cut before the season starts. So I think most of the wrestlers, on high school and college level, and especially or even in Germany on the Bundesliga level, between season, I think they will need to talk to some of the guys. I don't know it actually, but I think between season, what I know about some high school and college, they go up a lot, and then they drop down a lot for the season, and then they stay during the season. But they really, the first drop is the initial drop, and that's the initial drop that they're doing if they want to fight UFC. And it will not, it's hard to take that away from them. And they learn that on a hard way because they get older, the weight cut even gets more difficult as well. And they used to cut so much weight during the wrestling season, and now all of a sudden you see all those wrestlers missing weight because they're not taking into account that they're getting older. They cannot do just an initial drop, but then they have to do it really carefully with maybe somebody watching your blood, watching I actually don't know how a healthy weight cut goes. So I'm the one jumping ropes with a sweatsuit on. So I'm the wrong person to ask for.
Which I think is a good way to come to the last leg. And I will start with myself to tell you from my experience as a former amateur and professional fighter. And even, well, back then in Germany, MMA wasn't that evolved. So we didn't do hard weight cuts. We were like, I was running around at 87 kilos. I was fighting at 84. So you couldn't call that weight cutting. But the thing is, as a fighter, amateur and professional, I was always intimidated by the bigger guys. If they were cutting weight hard or something, and they stood in front of me and they looked like they are from another weight class. And I think most of you viewers will not be professional UFC fighters, but rather martial arts enthusiasts. And I can tell you, in the end, for me and for all the feedback that I get from my students fighting today, after the fights, it was never, almost never about the strength or the bigger weight. Yeah? If you're fighting on amateur level, if your opponent is 5 kilos heavier than you or not, or is like 20% stronger on you than not, will not define the fight. On a professional world-class stage level, where every detail counts, of course, it might be that little more weight, it might be that little more strength. But on amateur level, it's much more about being prepared, being versatile, being mentally stable, and all those other factors. But the weight cut really shouldn't bother you as much as it definitely will. That's my last words. Felipe.
It makes sense. I mean, I always say this, like, if the technique is similar, then you're going to have other aspects having a great role. Strength, speed, flexibility, all of those. But I agree, like, I see some people for small tournaments here in Germany, they're cutting a lot of weight and really worried about this. And in reality, that's, I mean, especially in tournaments like this, as an amateur, people should actually relax. And that's what I try to tell my students as well when they come to me. Because, like, I remember there was a student who was like, I'm weighing 71 kilos. Which division should I fight in the 70.6 or the 76 kilos? I was like, 70.6. You cut 400 grams, you have 1 month to do that, that's fine.
Yes.
But other than that, like, stress yourselves. Like, I see people dropping a lot of weight for a tournament that they're not that important. And I mean, of course, in the end, since we're talking about amateur scenario, I leave a lot to the students also to decide for themselves, because, as Ulf said, people are grown-ups, and I have to trust them if they tell me, Felipe, look, it is okay for me to drop, 5 kilos in 1 month. I'm going to trust it. The only thing, because I've been in that spot before, I missed weight once in my life. And it was by far the worst experience I had in tournament. I was really, really embarrassed by missing weight. That's personal. Okay, so that what I tell them is like, look, you tell me what is comfortable for you. You tell me which weight you're going to make the weight.
Show up.
But make the weight. If you're having this commitment with me, I'm having the commitment with you. I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna scream everything I can to help you. Everybody who saw me in tournament knows how
takes that literally. He uses his voice.
Yeah, that's true. But it's the only thing that I tell the students. Like, it's your choice. You guys tell me what feels comfortable for you. But make the weight. I remember there was one student that came like 2 days before tournament. Can I change weight classes? I'm a little bit overweight. I was like, how overweight are you? 5 kilos. What? like a joke, and I felt in that moment disrespected because I'm giving everything to that guy to perform, and the guy shows up 5 kilos above without, like, he could have said that 1 week before and we would have changed the weight class, but 2 days before the tournament you cannot do that anymore. So that was another situation. But I mean, when we're talking about amateur level, like, also, is it what is important is to focus on the fight. So have your mindset on the fight. Weight is playing a role, but if you're focused, if you're training, that's the most important.
Start.
I agree to these last words.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
harder.
also on amateur level,
The third
no,
or fourth person.
when it's fight day, you want to be, even on amateur level, you want to be in the best state you possibly can be, and you will not be when you lost a lot of energy thinking about things which are not so essential in this moment. And when it comes to the level where weight cutting is an issue, I think most important is that it's well guided, that you have a good structure, that you know how to do it, that you make sure you get the right knowledge provided. And what we also didn't talk about at all is I think what is also an issue is so weight cutting strategies also work often differently on female bodies. And I think a lot of women do have a hard time doing weight cuts because they are in the end just very poorly instructed by male coaches, because there's very little knowledge provided what to take into consideration.
That's true.
And I think to have yourself or somebody with you who has a good foundation of knowledge and knows how to do it is very, very essential if you want to go this step to start cutting weight.
Yeah, so I will be the one who's exploding the bomb here, or will do it totally different. And I think on an amateur level, so I'm not saying it's the right thing, but on an amateur level, as more weight as you can cut, the more difference you will make, because people will not have the experience of fighting, they will not have the strength yet, they will not have the coordination yet. And if you're the one managing to cut 2 or 3 kilos more, or even 5 kilos more, you will make a huge difference on an amateur level. So this now, I hope not that everybody now goes home and cuts 10 to 15 kilos because Jens said so, but I'm telling you, you will make, that's the stuff that you said, you will make definitely a big impact. If you're able to cut weight on the amateur level already, then you will make a big impact on this amateur level. That's why a lot of high school kids already start cutting so much weight, or even in junior high school, when they're somewhere in between 13 to 14 years or 10 years when they start wrestling, they're already doing cutting weight. And those are the ones managing to cut big weight, are the ones winning big time in those matches-wise. But, and that's a big but, it's the health issue. So, you're making a difference, and you will make a big difference. But the thing is, how long can you do this on a level like this?
What's the sacrifice?
And what's the sacrifice for it? And how far do you want to get with what? And so I think if you find a healthy way of cutting some weight, actually, so I'm not a fan of saying don't cut any weight, because you have to get your body used to a rhythm of weight cutting. I think because in a later stage you will definitely cut more weight somewhere, and it will get harder for you the older you get. Look at me, I know I'm trying to cut weight every day. So, but there is too much attraction outside.
Sure, that's right.
There's just too much attraction outside.
Yeah.
But and it depends on the martial art as well. I had, when I stopped wrestling and I started fighting in Kyokushin, I moved up big time because I didn't want to cut weight anymore. And I have to tell you that those guys in the middle, there are 3 weight classes in Kyokushin if you fight in European level, and if you fight world championships, it's just 1 weight class. So you can imagine how this works.
Yeah.
And if you fight in the middleweight classes, I found out for myself that in wrestling at 171 as well, the guys are the most athletic guys, I think, and the most fastest guys, strongest guys, and the fastest guys you can find. Most of the time, the most technical guys as well. So I try to avoid those middleweight classes, and so I had to bump up. I actually went up to heavyweights to fight the big heavy guys because they were too slow, and most of them felt not too strong. Kyokushin is not hitting somebody in the face with your fist, so you're fine with that. And but so back to the weight cutting issue, it was just a side. So you make a big difference if you cut a lot of weight fighting, and you make a big difference to your health as well. So it's important. You need to understand what you want to achieve, what you want to do is. Cut a lot of weight, you will definitely start winning a lot of tournaments and fights, especially on amateur level, easily. But you will tear down your health a lot, depending how often you have to do it. That's all I want to add.
I kind of agree with you, but I don't think that actually reflects in a physical way. I think the fact that you cut a lot of weight, this is something that I started thinking about a lot after I started training with Muhammad Ali, which is this sense of deservedness. And this mentally is very strong. And also, I think that this plays a big part when you cut a lot of weight and you think of all the sacrifices you did to be in that fight, that makes you mentally stronger. And I think that's what actually prevails more in a match than actually being in a lower weight class, being like 5 kilos lighter and stuff. I think that the fact that you are fighting there and you know, like, man, I had to cut 10 kilos to be here and train my ass off, and this gives you a lot of strength as well.
Yeah.
So I think, so I think that's it. In my opinion, that's the big difference between someone who didn't do the effort, like I was eating a pie before the match, between the guy who didn't have breakfast before the match. Is this how can I say, who wants more in that sense?
That's definitely taking into account as well, definitely, but there is a physical difference, definitely. If you're able to cut that much weight, if you're able to take the strength with you because you're used to, there's a strength difference. And I mean, you see even on amateur levels in Brazil, I think MMA fighting, those guys cut so much weight, and I know it's unhealthy for them. They will not make a career out of it, but it's like crazy, and they're much stronger. I mean, I heard stories from the guys training there. Yeah, but I heard stories from the guys training over there in Brazil from our boys, and they told me some stuff that's crazy how much weight they cut over there. So, but they win.
But how long?
Yeah, and the question is, and one last thing maybe for me. One last thing maybe. I think at the end the fighters are doing it to make the money, but the money comes from the fans watching it. So that's something I would maybe discuss with the organization. Do you think it makes a difference if the same fighters fighting 1 or 2 weight classes above, would anybody watching the fights even care? They don't care about making the weight. They want to see good fights and they want to see the action. So they don't care if
they would. So see better fights if the people can think straight.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah. And that's if you regulate that, you would have better fights. Nobody would lose the money, and everybody would be fine. So I think it's just a regulation thing at the end. But if you don't do it, I think it's kind of legal cheating because I think Joe Rogan said that or anybody, and it's true. You're going down to this weight, especially on this professional level. You only be there 5 minutes on this weight class the day before, maybe 2 minutes. I don't know. How long does it take from them to get off the it's not the stage, the pre-weigh, and they do actually. I think they can look at their food and at their drinks already. So they're on this weight that they're going to fight the next day. They're going to fight the next day in a weight class called maybe 170 pounds. But they are going to be at 190 pounds, and some of them are going to be at 196 pounds. So it's legal cheating at the end because they're not on the weight when they're fighting. Yeah,
absolutely. That's the crux. All right. So, guys, you heard a lot of different opinions, but also some agreements among us all. But if we wouldn't have different opinions and would give up our opinions easily, it wouldn't make much of a good podcast, right? So, see you guys next time. Bye from Jens, Stella, Felipe, and me.
Take care, everyone.
And don't stop cutting weight, everybody.
Thanks for joining.
Exactly. Don't even start.
This is just